I asked 100 leading Christian apologists what they think is the best argument for the existence of God.
Well, isn't that so very nice of you? It is a shame that it's all for naught though, since calling something the best argument doesn't mean that it's a good one. And hell, if there isn't some sort of overwhelming consensus, doesn't that suggest that they're all kind of bad? I mean, imagine 100 engineers asked for the best evidence of internal combustion. It would be weird if they gave wildly differing answers, and even weirder still if the vast majority of them didn't say, because of X.
William Lane Craig, Wes Huff, Nancy Pearcey, Alan Parr, Trent Horn, Stuart Connectley, and more.
And more? Wait, are you telling me that there wasn't a list of exactly 100 people? I'll have to check my calculator on that one. Also, I don't know about anyone else, but it's not exactly an impressive lineup. But to be fair, that is only because they are all idiots. Don't believe me? You'll see.
Some of the answers were completely expected, and some of them totally took me by surprise.
First part feels like an indictment of your group as a whole. Loads of them are saying the same old shit. Also, I'm betting the unexpected part is the exact same shit again, but wearing a funny hat.
We're going to look at 5 categories from the least cited to the most cited, most popular, and highlight some crucial apologists along the way.
What is it with apologists doing the we're gonna show you the shit arguments first that I have noticed as a trend in these parts? Is it supposed to be strategic or what? Because you would think strong first, and then, hey, here's some weaker sounding ones, but don't forget how good that first one was. This is just supplemental. Of course, in all cases, the first or last, it really makes no difference. They are all rarely better or worse than any other. I reckon it's just to make you think, okay, well, that one was stupid, but the next one, that'll be super smart, right? Of course, that still assumes that popular equals good. But I mean, look at me. I have nearly 150,000 subs, and I still suck.
We're also going to look at why Os Guinness and Doug Grotice wouldn't answer my question.
I'm going to assume it's because they just don't like you. I mean, can you blame them? I don't even know who you are, and I'm already sick of the sight of you. But hey, maybe it's because they have a big brain smart guy objection to this, like, well, all of them are kind of dumb. But if I were a betting prick, I would imagine it's something really silly.
Let's start with the smallest category, which I've dubbed existential. These are kind of personal encounters or experiences with God.
You know what? Fair enough. At least most of your respondents recognize that shit is fucking stupid. Because it really is. And while I don't think that the arguments are much better, at least they can't be dismissed with the plural of anecdote is not evidence. And the fact that a lot of you seem to recognize that, not gonna lie, I'm more impressed than I expected. You know, the same way when my kids were 3 years old and they'd jump an inch off the ground and then ask if I was impressed. Yes, darling. The audacity of that question is through the roof. Well done.
So, for example, this is one that surprised me. The great John Lennox said a transformed life he considers the best evidence for the existence of God.
Wow, that asshole. Isn't he the one who's all like, me am do maths, therefore God? His best evidence is his fifis. You know what? I'm not surprised because I've heard his arguments and they are not good. So not good that they make personal experience sound outright fucking objective by comparison. Good job, John.
So think about that. Oxford professor, science and philosophy and religious background, says a changed life is the most powerful piece of evidence for God.
I am thinking about that, and by your own statistics, that puts him on the bottom rung of all the arguments. That is damning of his credibility. Makes you wonder how the fuck he got any in the first place.
So by transformed life, we mean somebody whose life is broken in some sense and then is transformed by Jesus.
The problem with that is, how do you know it's actually transformed by Jesus and not the idea, the thing or thought that he represents? You can't, mostly because he's not real, but also because literally any idea can change your life for better or worse, or even to a separate path. But they don't have to be true to do that. And don't forget that there's people who think Jesus tells them to do all sorts of fucked up shit all the time. So even as an idea, he ain't strictly positive. Basically, you only have to like the idea for it to affect you. I like whiskey, but that doesn't mean it's real. It isn't, because I already drank it all.
Of course, we see this in the Bible when the blind man in John says, all I know is I was blind, but now I see. It's someone's testimony or experience of transformation by God.
The fact that your only example of an actual transformation is one from the big book of bullshit speaks volumes to just how worthless this idea is as evidence of fucking anything. God damn.
The next category, I dubbed this one unique arguments. These are arguments that one or two people held, and I kind of lumped them together.
Thee dubbed them, did they, good sir? Well, that's cool, but it remains to be seen. And wait, how was this not the lowest popularity category? You know, other on a chart is supposed to cover everything else, right? Just because there are more of them together, and supposedly they are all different, well, they just don't go there. Damn it, Mandem doesn't even know how to do statistics properly. That or he did this on purpose to hide the fact that they're all kind of shit.
So J. Steve Miller, if you follow this channel, you'll recognize I've had him on a bunch of times to talk about near-death experiences. He's the only one that cited near-death experiences. Now, I think this is a huge growing field more apologists need to lead into, but he's done some amazing work on that.
Well, apparently the rest of them don't. Again, props to most of them for not being that idiotic. And way to prove my point on them being shit, because I unfairly called the transformation one the worst, when near-death experience is so much worse. I mean, subjective experience when your brain is likely not fucking working properly at all is amazingly ridiculous. And the fact that you think it's something more of you should be talking about is a move that I completely support. I mean, talk about easy money. You motherfuckers doing all the work of making you look stupid for me. Thank you.
Trent Horn, a Catholic apologist, was the only one who said contingency. Now, this is a kind of causological argument, but it moves from the existence of contingent things, like the universe, that didn't have to exist, as saying the best explanation for its existence is a necessary being.
Contingency, the kind of argument, like most of them to be fair, that sounds smart until you think about it for even a second. Because even if we grant the whole thing, it still doesn't get you to a god or even a being. Although I feel like an unthinking, unfeeling space being with no wants or desires, accidentally a universe, just sounds way more plausible than a personal god who really likes you specifically because of how cool you are.
Now, two people, Mary Jo Sharp and Ruslan KD, said the argument from reason. And there's different versions of this that C.S. Lewis and Alvin Plantinga gave, but it's basically a move from the reliability of our cognitive faculties to understand truth in the world to the best explanation being not some naturalistic blind process, but that we were built to understand truth in a certain fashion.
Well, way to straw man natural selection, buddy. Not a blind process, but a highly effective mechanism for bringing out effective traits. Reason being one of them, which leads me to the fact that this is also a false dichotomy, when other explanations beyond those two exist. Reason and or rationality could simply be facts about the universe, like gravity, or that all the whiskey belongs to me. And the fact that you don't know that is very telling.
There's some other arguments, transcendental argument, consciousness, and the argument from desire that people gave as well.
And so very kind of you not to name names. Save those people from the embarrassment of being associated with those shit arguments. Although why you didn't extend that same graciousness to the rest of your victims in this sick prank, I have no idea. But still.
Now, the third category, this was given by 15 apologists that I asked, and this is basically the evidence for Jesus. So this could be the life, the teachings, the impact, or the miracles of Jesus.
You know, you could have almost had me give you something until you included the fucking miracles. Because, you know, I'm not a mythicist. Don't get me wrong. While I think it's entirely possible that there wasn't a historical Jesus, I'm also perfectly happy with the idea that there was one. But the second you give him any supernatural feats, no, that guy did not exist. You know why? Because magic isn't fucking real.
They consider the best evidence for God. Now, this first one, let's say the least surprising thing in this entire study is, of course, Gary Habermas, who's probably studied the resurrection as much or more than anyone who's ever lived, said, drumroll, the resurrection.
Man, you love your appeals to authority, don't you? And again, supernatural is bad evidence because we in fact have no tangible proof for anything like that ever happening. To be frank, all supernatural means to me is thing that never happened, because if it could happen, it wouldn't be supernatural, it would just be.
But Catholic apologists Stephanie Gray Connors and Stuart Pathetically also specifically said the resurrection. Now, interestingly enough, my father, Josh McDowell, was the only one who responded with fulfilled prophecy.
That's a funny way of saying, strangely enough, my father is a bit of an idiot himself. There is no such thing as a prophet. Only educated guesses / coincidences, vague statements that could mean anything, and stories that say a thing that happens later in its own text, and goes doubly for the prophecies of the Bible. And wait, wouldn't this just be one of the other categories again? Man, this is such a confusing listicle.
Now, he's made a case for the scriptures and the resurrection, but fulfilled prophecy being the most compelling evidence for the existence of God. And of course, there's a number of other wonderful apologists that point to Jesus.
Shame the one thing about the guy that could prove he am Magic Man is the exact reason he absolutely isn't that.
The next category is the moral argument.
Oh, here we go. That one's always a great time. And aren't we just fucking smashing through these? Also, what did I tell you? The graph for how convincing each argument is after the last is basically a flat fucking line.
There's different versions of the moral argument, but it's basically a move from the existence of objective morality that we all know and see and expect others to follow to the best explanation being a moral law giver.
So it of course fails on the very face of it, because morality is in fact not objective. Well, okay, it could be, but A, there's no evidence that it is objective. B, there are explanations for the existence of morality that completely skip the need for any kind of God, such as evolved morality. And C, even if morality was a fact, it's another case of it could be a thing that is a brute fact about the universe, not something necessitating a lawgiver. The fact that it is so high on your popularity list doesn't give me high hopes that number one is going to be any less dumb, but let's continue.
So the moral law points towards a moral law giver. So this is actually 23 people gave this.
I think the word you are looking for is 23 moron. I mean, sure, they are people too, but that's hardly the most descriptive character for them. You might as well say 23 bags of barely sentient goo. Wait, I was trying to give a vague description, not a perfectly accurate one. Damn it.
Now this first one, no surprise, Paul Copan, who's been one of the most able and consistent defenders of the moral argument for God today.
Listen, consistency is all well and good, but unfortunately, you can be consistent on anything that does not and will never make that thing a fact. In fact, completely unchanging opinions tend to be a pretty strong sign of being wrong about basically fucking everything.
But also Wes Huff, Gavin Ortland, the one and only Greg Kokel. We've got a UK apologist in here, Justin Brierley, and Nate Sala, also point towards the moral argument.
Well, I do appreciate the long list of people that I will now know have incredibly poor standards for the best evidence of anything. And thanks a lot, Justin Brierley, for being the first Brit Bong, apparently. Congratulations for making the rest of us look bad, you absolute bastard.
The number one category, and you could probably know what it is by this point.
Well, now, let's take some guesses. God is real because it makes me feel good. Because I really want him to be my best friend. I know. I am the most important person in the universe, but how can I let other people know in a way that won't immediately make me sound like a narcissist? The list really does go on and on.
52 of the apologists I asked said creation.
Well, damn it. My ones were all jokes, technically, but I completely forgot about the biggest joke of them all. God am real, 'cause look at all the stuff. An argument so entirely vapid, it's astonishing just how often you hear it come out of the mouths of so-called intellectuals, and makes you realize why so-called is such an apt addendum to whatever title they have. And it's literally over half the fuckers who think that that is the best possible argument for God. It is no wonder when you ask a lot of atheists what they think the best arguments for God could be, you will so often get, well, there aren't any, because half of all theists will be using this dumbass shit all the time. There are literally better arguments on this list, and even they aren't good. Fuck me.
Now, some just said creation in general. Some said like the cosmological argument. Some said fine-tuning, the origin of life. But something about creation pointing towards a creator was the number one response.
Well, the cosmology boy argument is dumb because it presumes the universe needs a creator, and it gives him special abilities simply because if he doesn't have them, then the argument doesn't work. Special pleading much. Fine-tuning has a bunch of flaws. Basically, you can only make that argument because you're in a universe that supports life in the first place, and several counters, including the multiverse or the idea that it just happens to be what universes are like, which would not strictly require there to be a guy doing the thing. And the origin of life, much like the origin of every other thing we have figured out, is most certainly going to be a natural one, not requiring any god to do it. So yeah, no.
Creation refers to a bunch of different particular aspects of the universe that seemingly point towards God.
Seemingly is doing a lot of the heavy lifting there. I think by seemingly what you really mean is, I want that to be the case, so I'm going to assume and accept that it is, and put no further thought into it.
So the Kalam cosmological argument points to the beginning of the universe, to there being a beginner. So whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause.
The universe began, so it needs a beginner. Therefore, God is a beginner. Holy shit, that makes so much sense. I mean, just think about all the stupid shit that he's made. Those are the kinds of terrible choices that only a rank amateur would ever make. Maybe God is real and he has absolutely no idea what he's doing. Shonk.
Fine-tuning points towards certain laws of physics and cosmology that exist within a very narrow range where the slightest change in those numbers would make the universe inhospitable to life.
As usual, slight in this context refers to hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of miles of differences, and also ignores that just because the universe works the way it currently does, doesn't mean a life-supporting universe couldn't exist in a completely different configuration.
So the fine-tuning seems best explained by a fine-tuner.
No, fine-tuning is absolutely explained by systems. The universe is the way it is because the rules of that universe, when followed for long enough, make a universe that looks the way the one we currently inhabit does. Now, you could say God made those rules, but again, the observation of something does not necessitate that someone put it there. Also, when you say fine-tuner, all I can think of is sexy fish, and that deeply disturbs and arouses me.
Others would be the origin of life, the amount of DNA you find in a cell, the complexity of information points towards a mind or an author of life.
The complexity of that information is in no way a sign that someone put it there, and especially when it comes to DNA. The amount of junk coding is absurd, and even when that junk turns out to be necessary for some other portion to function, that's usually because of a staggering inefficiency, not because that's the best way to do it. I mean, consider the amount of computer code that has dependencies that could be replaced with a single line of efficient code, but they don't because no one knows why it's there. Frankly, the utter spaghetti code of DNA in general is one of the strongest arguments against any kind of perfect, all-knowing and all-powerful God.
Now, this first one will not shock you at all. Of course, William Lane Craig, when I asked him, he looked at me with a little smirk and he's just like, cosmological. The Kalam argument, of course.
Of course, he is, after all, a well-known smug moron. And he loves the Kalam argument because he genuinely thinks that it makes him sound smart, which proves he isn't, because it's dumb as fuck.
But two others kind of surprised me. J. Warner Wallace and Lee Strobel, who both two of their first influential books kind of investigating the historical Jesus, both said the Kalam cosmological argument is the single best piece of evidence for God. Nancy Pearcey agreed. This one slightly surprised me. Titus Kennedy, who's an archaeologist, specifically said the Kalam. Hilary Ferrer with Mama Bear Apologetics, she goes, that's easy. And she didn't just say creation, she said protein and protein synthesis. That was very specific. Hugh Ross, no surprise, said fine-tuning. And Bible teacher, YouTuber Mike Winger also said creation. And again, there's a bunch of other amazing apologists that pointed towards creation as the best piece of evidence.
Yeah, I thought I might as well let that play out. And the protein synthesis one, that's just more God of the Gap shit. But I thought I might as well address it quickly for the sake of completeness. Now, all we have left is those two final outliers. Let's find out what their biggest, brainiest of best arguments for God's so strong, they wouldn't even let you have them for some reason.
And I thought it was interesting that two apologists that I just respect and love and have had on this program didn't answer or wouldn't answer my query. But I think there's wisdom in why they don't. Os Guinness said, quote, "The best argument is the best argument for the specific person." In other words, there is no best argument. There's a lot of wisdom in that. Instead of saying, here's what I think is the best, I'm going to force it on you, is finding what's interesting for a person and try to prevent something that might be compelling to them.
That's not what he said. He said, use whatever works, who gives a if it's good. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but that's what it implies, and it is as dishonest as it is fucking stupid. The best argument for anything should stand up to scrutiny, not be something that those who catch the rhetorical bullshit from a mile away will ignore, but someone not armed for it might accept without realizing that it's fucking bollocks.
Doug Groteis said, "I cannot do that. Too simplistic. It depends upon what best means. I'm a cumulative case guy, so I think we need several to make the case." Now, that didn't surprise me because Doug is a careful philosopher and wanted to nuance things. But there's something to be said. I actually think most apologists in this group would agree that it's not just one argument. It's the weight of different arguments, philosophical and moral and experiential and historical.
Well, you're right. It is the combination of all those arguments together that prove that God must be utter horseshit. Because separately, those arguments are all pretty bad. But when you combine them together, they are fucking catastrophic. Bye!